Welcome to the David Kurten Show today, and I'm delighted to have a fantastic guest on who is an activist and campaigner as well as a candidate for Parliament and for local elections. I'd like to welcome to the show Bianca Isherwood. Welcome, Bianca.
Thanks so much for having me, David, to talk about this.
No, really good. We're going to talk about the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill, but I should just introduce you a little bit more because you were a parliamentary candidate in Southend, and you've also stood for council, and you're the Heritage Party coordinator in Essex. So you're taking on a lot of things as well as being active in a lot of other things. So is there anything else you do among all the amazing things that you do so much to help people around your community?
Well, previously I run the Freedom Network branch for Southend and the People's Health Alliance hub for Southend. Obviously, I home educate my children, so I'm very focused on that at the moment. And we do all sorts of things. Obviously, we're not elected, so I ran for Milton Ward locally. I have helped a lot of candidates and a lot of candidates in the whole Southend East with various issues. So we're always active in this and that.
Yeah, marvelous. It was really good to come up and speak at something that you organized just a few weeks ago or a couple of months ago about the smart city plans. I think everyone's concerned about that. You know, that's just one other thing. But I know you want to get into talking about the latest in home education and what the government is trying to do to undermine that, because, you know, that's something that I know is close to your heart, my heart, and a lot of people as well. There shouldn't be any restrictions on home education as far as I'm concerned. There never have been. There's no need for there to be restrictions or regulation concerning it. But there's this horrendous bill going through Parliament at the moment called the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill. So it sounds nice. It sounds like, just from reading the title, oh, this is about improving well-being for children. But actually, there's a huge amount in the bill which is very, very detrimental to home education. And home education is fantastic as far as I can see, you know, given what's going on in a lot of schools today. And, you know, some people wouldn't want to take their kids anywhere near a state school with all the stuff that's going on. So just, you know, set the scene, Bianca. This bill is going through Parliament at the moment. What are your main concerns about the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill?
Well, it's literally the government are using home education as a scapegoat to get these issues through. So I can see a lot of I think they call it the Hegelian dialectic in this. So obviously they are using the Sarah Sharif case. And I'm going to talk about that last, if you don't mind. I'm going to build up to the worst as we go along. So stay tuned. So I see a lot of Agenda 2030 in this. And if they really wanted to improve any of these areas, the Children's School Bill would be education, home education, and well-being. The fact that they're all lumped together is literally, in my opinion, to disguise all of the parental rights that they're going to be taking away. So they're leaning on and they're using the excuse of children's well-being. And even though I'm going to come back to Sarah Sharif, I will say, if the schools bill in its original format or the format with the suggested amendments was passed, was in power at the time, it would not have made any difference to the case of Sarah Sharif at all.
Right. So they're using something that people are rightly concerned about, outraged about, in order to undermine a freedom which we've always had, and it wouldn't have made any difference to that case at all. You know, I can see that, and you're absolutely right. I mean, this bill, I've looked at it just recently. It's got 67 sections in it. It's 137 pages long, and what they do with all these bills is they lump lots of different things together, which are, you know, only tenuously linked. So they maybe put some good things in, but with a lot of bad things as well. Is that how you see it?
Yes. So home education is on the rise for various reasons. And obviously the state's control over our children's school is a massive part of that. So first of all, the schools bill, the Children's Schools and Wellbeing Bill, will take away parental rights. So you're not going to have the say-so over taking your children out of school or choosing your child's school. So number one, if you want to take your child out of school because you don't like the RSE or any reason that you just want to home educate, you will have to convince the local authorities that it's in the child's best interest. So because at the moment it's your lawful right. So the law is everyone must educate their child to their ability and aptitude and age appropriateness. And as long as you're showing progression, then that's fine. You can remain home educated, and that's from the term after the child turns 5. But obviously that's going to change. So they're going to use previous at-risk status as the number one thing to look at, they say. And obviously the people that are making these decisions, they're hired by the local authority. So they're hired by your local council. They're going to put out a job advert, and this job goes to anyone. A lot of the people that do this role, they're very young. They've just come out of university. They don't have a lot of life experience. They're highly indoctrinated. They're not education specialists. They're not children's mental health specialists. They're not specialists in any area, to be honest. So, and there's such a vague outline in the bill that it really opens up the opportunities for these individuals to abuse, the vagueness of it. So basically, if they don't like your face or they don't like the books you're using because it triggers them, then they might give you a back to school order. So previous at risk status can also be abused because I know a lot of single mothers who are home educating, and they have done a really good job and worked very hard to move their children to a secure and safe and stable environment. So often in that case, the ex-partner is not involved in the child's life, but the bill will also seek that you have to have both parents' permission to home educate. And I also know a lot, actually, of parents who have gone to court in that situation, and the court always favours the parent who doesn't want to home educate. Regardless of how much information you give, it's in the child's best interests for educational purposes and medical purposes. It doesn't matter. They always favour. It goes the same with vaccinations as well. If you ever take a vaccination case to court where parents disagree whether they're separated or not, they always rule in that favour. And
yeah, I mean, this is just another example of bias by the courts, by the judges who've been indoctrinated, civil servants, you're talking about, who've been indoctrinated to favor putting kids into a state school, which are, in my view, a lot of them are state Marxist indoctrination centers. So there's an inherent bias among people working for the state to get children into state schools and take them away from education given at home, which is absolutely appalling.
And even if you're in school, if you're not home educating, say you moved and you wanted to go to a school that was near your house because it made more sense, you still have to ask permission to change school, and it will go by things like catchment areas. So we've got X amount of this age children, they might be coming up, so no, you can't move schools. But if there's, I don't use this word lightly, trauma. I know pop culture loves to throw around the word trauma quite a lot, but there is a lot of pupils, especially young girls, experiencing trauma in schools in a sexual sense. So I read the Ofsted report, which is on the .gov website for last year, and the statistics were something like, I think I've got it written down, I'm pretty sure it's 79% of girls aged 9 to 16 had experienced some form of unwanted touching in schools. Wow. Yeah. And when I was reading a lot of stuff about the schools bill on Facebook threads, and bearing in mind I wasn't looking for this specifically, just browsing conversation threads, I found about 20 mothers who had said that their daughters had experienced some kind of sexual abuse in same-sex toilets in schools, and they were very upset that there was nothing in the bill that was going to protect that. But just for example, say that you had a daughter, she had experienced that, and now she doesn't want to go back to school. because she has a trauma around the school. And she goes, I just want to change school. Everyone knows what happened there. Everyone's talking about it. I don't want to deal with it. I want to change schools. Well, then you've got to then convince someone that that's in your child's best interest. And the school take absolutely zero responsibility for things of that nature because it's not to do with them. So
this is the kind of thing that the government should be concerned about, but it seems they're completely overlooking that, because another part of their policy and ideology is to support transgenderism and to allow males to go into female toilets, which is just horrendous. But then, you know, the solution to that, I know for a lot of people, is to home educate, and I understand that there's not one single number you can get from somewhere to tell you exactly how many children are home educated now. But one figure I did find was 126,000 just in England and Wales. So but that's a conservative estimate. There's probably like 150,000 plus in the whole of the UK. And a lot of those children are home educated because their parents have taken them out of school because of bullying and because of trauma, like you say, and anxiety, and they do far better at home. And now the government is insisting that, well, you have to convince some minion of the state in order to be able to take them out of school and home educate. This is appalling.
Well, Labour have already admitted, and they've said very similar statements, that they believe that all the children belong to them. You know, we're state-owned children, so obviously that's just evidence of that, because they believe that some random employee in an office knows what's best for your child over the parent. So they have also tried to bring this bill in twice, Labour. It's always been under Labour government. And I think the last time they tried to bring this bill in, it was thrown out because it goes against your human rights. I think they wanted to use the part of the bill, which is the unique child identification number. They wanted to use your NHS number and then build off that. But apparently that's against your human rights, which is why at the same time as the Children's Schools and Wellbeing Bill and the Schools Register Bill, they're also passing simultaneously the Data and Access Bill, so that we cannot win this time around on the human rights grounds.
This is the pincer movement that they're doing. They realized last time, I think it was under Tony Blair's government, they tried to bring in some kind of school registration, but that was defeated in the Commons, with even some of his own Labour MPs voting against it. But now here we are about 20 years on. There's a whole different set of MPs that, you know, they've been undermining the culture and pushing this ideology. And as you say, they believe that children are the property of the state. This is Bolshevik, basically, isn't it? This is not British. This is not English or Scottish, Welsh, Irish. It's Bolshevik, and this is how they think. But we have to fight against that and affirm that parents are the primary educators, that parents are responsible for their children, and children belong to their parents, not the state.
Yeah. So another thing, and this goes for schools as well as home education. So the home education community are worried about being served with a back to school order, which I'll come back to. But everyone should be concerned about the increases in fines and jail time. So if there's a term people use called school refusers. So they're children who don't go to school very often, have a high absence rate. So take, for example, if you're one of those daughters or one of those girls, I mean, it doesn't have to be girls, you know, there's all sorts of trauma that you could have. Say they're saying to you as a parent, if you make me go to school, or if you make me go to that school, I'm going to kill myself. So now we have to choose between, do we send them to school, or we're going to receive a huge fine, or 3 months to 56 weeks in jail?
Wow.
Because the back to school order, so you can be given that. So it's if you get 5 strikes in a 10-week period, then that will trigger a back to school order, a court summons, and a fine. And they've also taken away the right to appeal a back to school order, and that's more important to the home education community than it is to people in school. But still. And the 5 strikes, a strike can be for lateness. So let's hope you're not in one of those places where they've got the bollards in and you have to go around the ring road. because you're going to be late then.
Yeah. They
5
make you late and then they punish you for it.
Yeah.
Dreadful.
So lateness, and the most ridiculous one is inset days. So inset day is a day where they say the school is closed, have the day off, but that's going to count towards your 5 strikes in a 10-week period.
That's ridiculous. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, when I was a teacher, I remember inset days. The children didn't have to go to school. So how can they say that you're not attending school on a day that the children don't have to go to school?
It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And also, obviously, if you can't get a medical note, that will count as a strike. And 5 strikes, if you count lateness and illness and inset days, is really not that hard. And everyone knows you can't get a doctor's appointment as it is. And there are some illnesses, if a child has diarrhea and sickness, if you phone a GP, you're going to say, oh, stay at home, drink plenty of fluids. They're not going to give you an appointment, and they're not going to give you a note for that either. And obviously, we're not going to have an NHS soon anyway. So there'd be the issue of people can't afford a doctor's note.
Wow. I mean, yeah. I mean, this is a wider issue. The country is falling apart. Healthcare is falling apart. You know, bureaucracy seems to be the only thing which is getting money in order to enforce these kind of compliance rules and regulations. It's dreadful. But yeah, I didn't know that there was going to be this increase in fines, and then potentially you can end up in prison.
Up to 56 weeks. So I don't understand how this has got anything to do with children's well-being if all the parents are in debt or in jail.
Yeah, of course. It's the opposite, isn't it? I mean, this is an inversion, and almost everything the Labour Party is doing is an inversion, is gaslighting. It's just really hammering people and then saying, "Oh, you know, well, we're doing you a favour." And it's just tyrannical and it's abusive. Actually, I find that the state here and the government that we've got is completely abusive to ordinary people, and in threatening them with these things, with legislation. I mean, this is lawfare at the legislative level, if you like. It's absolutely appalling. But you know, so you were talking, you know, these are fines, but this is the wider thing. I think they're called school attendance orders, aren't they? Something like that. Yeah.
I mean, and the fines are not easy to negate. People would just say, oh, well, I just won't pay it, I'll refuse. But they're not civil matters. They'd be government issued fines. So they're a lot harder to get out of paying.
So they're criminal. Are they criminal fines?
Yes. And also, if you get one of these as a parent, that is going to go on your criminal record. And
sorry, this is horrendous, Bianca. So if a child doesn't go to school, then the parent becomes a criminal.
If you get given, if it's frequent, so if you've got more than 5 strikes in 10 weeks, you will get a criminal record. And apparently this is already in effect. People don't know about it. So I have a friend, she tried to get her children the week off for her wedding. She was refused. So she said, I'm going to take them out anyway. And she got fined £60 a day per child. And eventually she did have to pay that. But what I didn't know, and I don't think anyone really knows, is that is on your criminal record. So that part is already in place. But it's just that it's more likely you're going to rack those up from now on.
I guess some of this has already come in under the fake Conservatives because they've been in power before Keir Starmer for 14 years. So that they must have been responsible for some of this. So again, you see the uniparty in operation. One lot does something bad, another lot comes in and they do something worse, and they just increase the tyranny against ordinary people. But yeah, is this going to affect parents that home educate their children a lot because they might find themselves on the rough end of some of these fines?
Oh yeah, you can get, as I said, if this untrained person, I'll come back to it. We'll come back.
Yeah, sure.
The last thing I have to say about the back to school orders for school people is the SEND children. And obviously it's a huge problem. And I'm not talking about children who have mild learning disabilities. I'm talking about children who I think it would be phrased as having a SEND meltdown, perhaps. So if you can't get them to go to school and they're a teenager, they're physically bigger than you, If they are physically rocking and fighting you, it's not, whose interest is it for you to try and force them into school that day, other than the parent's employer? Because it's not good for the child. It's not good for the other children that would have to witness that behavior in school. It's not good for the teachers. So in some cases, you know, that child probably needs to be placed in a school that can, you know, meet its needs. So there's a lot of time off. But you're going to have to choose. Are you going to take the jail time, or are you going to try and physically manhandle a child into school? So, you know, that really affects parent relationships as well with the children.
The other thing, sorry, the other thing that I understand from this bill that's coming in is a registration system as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a section. We're going to
get onto that. Yeah, sorry.
So obviously there are people who are home educating because the school cannot meet their special educational needs, and those people might not have chosen to home educate, and in which case I would support for those parents to say, oh, would you like help placing the child, because they're home educated because they have to and they might not want to. That's different to those parents who have taken their children out of school and they've addressed their own SEND issues and they know best. And Labour are not putting anything in place. They have admitted they want to push all SEND children out of school back in school, but they're not making any provisions to do that. So we're out because it failed. What are you going to do? We're going to push them back into school. How are you going to make it different? How are you going to fix the problem? They don't have a plan for that at all.
It just sounds like something that someone just, you know, made up out of the top of their heads. Oh, well, this is what we need to do, without any thought to how it's going to affect the children themselves with SEND issues, special education and needs and disabilities.
Home education for a lot of SEND children is great because you get a one-to, the parent usually gives that child one-to-one time and they can learn in the way that they learn best. They can learn at their own pace. They just get lost in the classroom. They're not learning anything, and they deserve to be able to learn. And it's just counterproductive to have them in a generic mainstream school classroom. And it's those parents who are scared the most about getting back to school orders, because obviously it's not just the fact that the child doesn't educationally thrive in a mainstream school. That's when you get all the mental health problems. Like I've known children with SEND issues can't cope in school, they get tics, they start self-harming, you know, so it's a much bigger issue than just learning.
This goes a long way back in history, you know, to the Deering report of 1974, where they said, you know, people with special educational needs, it wasn't called that then, but, you know, people with disabilities and mental disabilities, as it was called then, should be educated in the mainstream. But before then, you know, they used to have special schools which were just specifically for people with these kind of issues, and they could thrive in those schools. But, you know, since then, you know, it goes back 50 years now, this has been the overriding ideology. But, you know, with home education, people can get around that because parents who know their own children can decide, well, home education is best for someone with special educational needs. But then now we've got a government trying to impose this ideology again over the top of parents who know best. And it comes back again to the state thinking that they control children, they know best, when actually they don't. This is Marxian thinking. They just see children as a unit to be, you know, sat on a chair and stuffed full of whatever information they want to give them. It doesn't work.
No, and the other thing I don't like about the bill, and this is one thing that's also not linked to home education, is their breakfast clubs. Have you heard about the Labour's breakfast clubs?
That's in the bill as well. I'm completely against that because, again, that undermines family time. It's ridiculous.
So their pilot breakfast club have failed because they only costed out 60p per head per child, and they didn't cost in the childcare of paying people to run it. So failed 60p per head, but they spent 90.5 million on a social media campaign about the breakfast club.
Oh my goodness.
And there's been loads of people making reels and content listing off what that 90.5 million could have fixed. I mean, it probably isn't enough to fix one whole problem, but we could have spent it on a lot of stuff. and we could have been a quarter of a way there. And to say that it's failing because they've only costed 60p per head when they've spent that much on that campaign is ridiculous. And this is exactly what happened in France and Germany before they cancelled home ed, or they tried to ban home ed. I think there's still some ways around it in France, but Germany, it's gone. And they lowered the age of free childcare, so it was for under ones, and they lengthened the amount of time you're at school. They brought in the breakfast clubs, they brought in the after school clubs, and then they banned home education. That's the order it went. So they're saying that they wanted the breakfast clubs to be mandatory for every primary school. And then how long before it's mandatory to go to these breakfast clubs? You know, that's the way I'm looking at it. So that is the complete, obviously, an average school mom sees their child for, or dad sees their child for 13 hours a week. And that 13 hours a week is where you both come home and you're both tired from work and from school, and you're probably sitting in front of a screen. And the average home ed mum sees their child for 77 hours per week.
Wow.
And it's not possible. There are a lot of my friends who think like me, and I'm not meaning to be rude, but they're a little bit in denial to say, I'll just tell them what's right from wrong when they come home from school. There's no way you can undo the amount of programming and, you know, moral values that school is teaching children in 13 hours per week. It's just not going to happen.
Well, kids are at school for, you know, even without a breakfast club, they would be there for at least 30 hours a week. You know, 6 hours a day. If you try to extend that, so they're at school from 8 in the morning until 6 in the evening, well, then that's 50 hours a week, isn't it? Yeah, you're right. So there's 4 times for as much time spent in front of Marxist indoctrinators as you have to spend with your kids at home. You know, you just got to do the maths, haven't you? And that's high intensity indoctrination. And you are with your kids at home when you just want a bit of peace and quiet, you know, and just so yeah, it's obvious that that's not going to be enough to undo the damage which is done by a lot of state schools. But you know what you say there is you're really looking into the future, and this is something I didn't know. Again, they're bringing in these breakfast clubs and so on, and then attacking home education, and then they will go and make it compulsory to go to school. This looks like the plan of what they're trying to do, which again is Bolshevik, and it's just got no place in this country as far as I'm concerned.
No, and I fully understand that there are children in poverty and that will affect a child's ability to learn. That is another pro of home education. So now, obviously, I'm not working anymore. So now I'm a one-income household. We're on a lower income. So it obviously is really hard, especially, you know, cost of living. But I have more time to go and source food and cook from scratch. And, you know, 60p per head, all you're going to get is sugary cereal, which is not good for children's concentration. They're saying it's nutrient. It's not nutrients. I mean, I don't have a vehicle, and I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't have subscriptions, I don't gamble. So I prioritize that money for my children's nutrition at home. And we do homemade bread, and I go to the organic grocers, and my children will eat a whole mango for breakfast. Literally, they'll just eat a whole mango, and then an hour later we'll have steak and eggs. You're not going to get that. It's not going to happen in school at a breakfast club. So, yeah.
You might as well eat cardboard as go to one of those school breakfast clubs, to be honest.
It'll be bugs and bovia, in my opinion.
Oh my goodness, yeah. We get the WEF plan in the Bill Gates plan, I know, yeah.
So it breaches over 8 human rights, the bill. Your rights to expression, your rights to privacy, your right to family life, your right to religious expression as well. And part of the schools bill, they want to enforce home visits for home educated families. So where are the visits for school children? You know, if this is in the name of children's safety, statistically, school children are going to be abused just on the first factor of there's more of them. They don't have to have home investigations at the weekends or in the holidays, but home education, they'll have the right. At the moment, we can refuse, and we like to say, I'll email you reports. I'd like to keep everything in writing. So the schools bill would abolish that. And our homes can't be Ofsted rated because it's not a school, it's a family home. And they're going to come in, they might not like my books on the bookshelf. They might say, oh, that's a bit far right. Might need it back. And what if the house is found to be not okay on the guidelines? So say you're privately renting or you have a council house that's neglected, say it has mold. Back to school order because that environment's not safe. What are we going to do to fix the mold in the house or the neglect of the house that's not the people's fault? Nothing. So how is it for the children's well-being? And that child's going to go to school and they're still going to come home to the house that's got mold or that is in disrepair. So that's just, it does have zero relevance in my opinion.
The way to fix for well-being, if there's an issue like that, is to they could spend that money on fixing the mold problem in someone's house, which would probably be cheaper than sending all these officers round to assess you and what you're doing with education and sending them to school, and that's going to cost extra money. The school gets £5,000-6,000 a year for every extra pupil that they have in school, so that's going to cost money to some government, whether it's local or national. Whereas they could just fix your mold for much less money than that. So the whole thing is false accounting. It doesn't make any sense.
It's just if they can't get you on reports, they'll want to come and they'll want to find some reason to give you a back to school order. That's what really it is. And they want us to do these very lengthy reports. So anyone who's involved in your child's education, you have to have their name and their address, and they have to be vetted to be safe to be involved. So home education happens all the time. So for example, if we went to a cafe and we talked to an older person about World War II, I would have to log that in my report and then ask that stranger for their name, address and phone number. And then they would have to be checked out to see if they're safe to be part of my child's education, which is ridiculous. And what that's going to do is stop a lot of opportunities for home educated children. So most places in my area will do a home ed class. So whether it's sports, they'll do a home ed football club. Whether it's boxing, there's a home ed version. There's a home ed art class. All of these people are going to have so much red tape around being able to offer something to the home ed community. They're just going to pull out and say it's not worth it. So it's going to really decrease the opportunities we have and the amount of information they want from these reports. What website did you use? How long were you on the website for? What was the intended purpose of visiting that website? We're going to spend more time writing these reports than we are actually teaching our children or engaging in learning processes with our children. And no other group or, career, there's no other group of people in this society that has to hand over that amount of data. So it's highly discriminative.
It's like a war on people who are home educating, isn't it? Really, it's just doing this, making all these regulations and compliance. But the purpose of this is to destroy home education, because there's going to be a high percentage of people who just aren't going to be able to do that, and and they're not going to have a life, if they have to do all this compliance. And
it's going to be more focused on the admin, so it's very highly distraction. For you as an education giver. It reminds me, I don't know if you've ever read Dumbing Us Down by John Taylor Gatto.
I haven't, but I can imagine it's a good book.
It's a really good book. And he says about in American schools, children are, subconsciously programmed never to focus too much because they're waiting for the school bell. So it's going to become like that. Like for myself, I'd be thinking, oh, wait, stop that. I have to write that down that we just learnt that. And, what if you're doing bird watching? What are we going to put today? The pigeon is our teacher, and this is the pigeon's home and address. It's just ridiculous. And it shows they don't understand home education because they think that we're doing school at home and we're not. And obviously, in their eyes, all we'd have to do is say in the report, we're using this maths curriculum and we're using this English curriculum. And then if it changes, we have to report it. But obviously, home education doesn't work like that. I mean, we still do use box curriculum sometimes, but there's so much else around it that would would count. And then if we just give the bare minimum and ignore all that other stuff, then they're going to say we're not doing enough. You need a back to school order.
Well,
So,
I mean, this is like the language here is important, but something you mentioned to me in the past that you call it home education. It's not homeschooling.
no, that's
They mean different things.
Yeah. So home education is not what most people did in lockdowns, which was homeschooling, because that was mandated, from the school. You have to be on this call at this time. You have to do this work at this time. It doesn't work like that at all. But we probably haven't got time to discuss how it works. Where was we at to? So home educated children, we don't always take GCSEs because sometimes it's irrelevant to our career paths. And a lot of times, if we want to access higher education, you just need a strong portfolio in the subject, which is super easy because obviously, one, home educated children, they get to explore their interests more. They don't have to wait until they do a choice. And then even in schools, it's all theory. So we might decide we want to train in something, and then when we experience what that's actually like in real life is not what we thought it was going to be, and then you're already 18 years old, and then you've got to rethink it. So if you have a child who knows they want to do computer programming from age 12, they can spend a lot of time doing that, and by the time they're 16 they can probably teach that college class. So it's like a strong portfolio of work, which is how it usually works. I think they are trying to, it's not in the bill, but I have heard discussions, with the MPs to say that they would like to stop that. The fact that you can get access higher education through a portfolio and that you would have to do the GCSEs. Obviously, home educated people also have to pay for the GCSEs themselves. So there would be the issue of lower income families not being able to access the GCSE. That hasn't been a suggestion in the schools bill at all, that we do that for the well-being of the children.
That would make sense, wouldn't it? Because that would help. The parents who are home educating actually are helping the state reduce their costs already, because they don't have to be, you don't have to pay for the teachers and the materials in schools. The least they could do is help you to pay the exam fees so they can take the exams. You'd think that would be something that would be quite easy to do.
Well, a lot of local colleges run, I think it's 14 to 16 courses where you can access the GCSEs. And for the last 10 years, home educated children, bearing in mind there's fewer of us and not all of us take GCSEs, they have come out 30% higher success rate than school children. So because we're outperforming the school children consistently and that number is growing, what they've done is they said that we can't offer those college courses anymore because those teachers are needed in the schools because the schools are failing. So they've taken that away from us as well. It's
just so perverse, because you think a government that's healthy would actually look and see, oh, this is working really well. The children here are doing better. This is excellent. Let's put more resources into helping them do what they do. But it seems that, this is the tall poppy syndrome, isn't it? That you've got this Labour government and the Tories too. They want to cut the heads off all the tall poppies. They see something growing and doing something good, and they just want to cut it down. You can't have someone actually being excellent, which is completely perverse.
It is. Anything that shows home education in a positive light is squashed. It's becoming a bit like speaking out about Agenda 2030 or the vaccines, to the point where home educated children, a lot of them have their own YouTube channels for various reasons, whether it's they're doing it about gaming or they're doing it about the garden and the vegetables they're growing, all sorts of things. They're actually being closed down. There's no actual written statement by YouTube or in the law, but we're all thinking it's to do with the fact that children being able to work is part of the Schools and Wellbeing Bill. So they're coming in and they're closing down. It's not. There's been no statement, but it's a common pattern that everybody's noticed.
For no reason, what's happening.
Their child's, because it shows, a positive light. And obviously they've managed to keep, because home educated people like to keep to themselves. I think they're quite majority private people who just want to get on with their lives. And because we're not speaking out about it, because most of us know if we speak out it's a fight. It's a, what about this, what about that? We can't be bothered with it. So that's left a huge gap for the narrative to say that we're all dangerous weirdos. But school children who have YouTube channels, they're fine. They're not being shut down at all. It's just the home educated children, yeah. The framework, as I said before, you can't come into someone's family home and then rate that via Ofsted. And there's lots of other educational provisions like forest schools, like places like Hope Sussex. If there wasn't a need for them, they wouldn't exist. We're all going to have to now work under this one Ofsted framework, and it's not going to work. And if we have to change ourselves to meet that framework to carry on, then it will destroy whatever it is, as it exists. Yeah. It will destroy forest schools as they are. It will destroy home education as it exists. So it's just a very sly, low-key way of just getting rid of it all without saying they're getting rid of it all. Same with the academy.
There's never been a need for registration or any of these things before. I mean, we've had home education for, the whole of our history, essentially. Before there were formal schools that started up in the 19th century, we've got 1,000 years of history as England, and where there was no regulation about home education, and most kids were home educated, essentially. Exactly, and now, why suddenly do we need this now?
That whole having to have someone who is vetted and qualified to teach your child, whether it's, the people that you talk to or yourselves, there's something called co-ops, yeah? So home ed co-ops, which is where a bunch of home educating families come together and do something educational, whether that's a project, whether it's a one-off class, one time a week or one time a month. So I go to co-ops and I run a co-op. I try to run a co-op in my local library, although every week they make a new excuse for us to not be there. So it's hanging by a thread. This is another story.
Right.
But I would have to appear on all those children's reports. So if there's 8 of them, that might flag, oh, this person's teaching a lot of home ed children, and then I would then have to be qualified, and then it would cease to exist. So, co-ops are great because you will find in a group of people, each parent has a skill, or you're trained in that. You can teach that to the children. And I'm a trained scientist. Oh, let's do a science class because that is the definition of the village raising the children, and it's free. So I'm already being asked at the library, what's the name of your group? And I have to say we are individuals. We're not a group. Because as soon as I name my group, I would come under this legislation and then I would be shut down. That's also freedom of movement, freedom of assembly. We're not allowed to do that anymore, according to this bill.
Right. So this is just another, weapon to bring in, to undermine freedom, essentially. So, we've always had the freedom to do this. And, my view is that this bill is absolutely dreadful. I would repeal it the first chance I get, because parents are the primary educators of their children. There shouldn't be anything to stop people home educating. Not even the excuse they sometimes use is, oh, well, there's like Islamic schools and they're teaching kids how to be terrorists. Well, there may be a very small number of people that are doing that, but Ofsted already has a unit to deal with that and close them down. But the vast majority of people who are home educating their children do it because they are, Christian, or they are, like to teach children about nature, for example, or like, as I said before, they're worried about bullying in schools, and you've said people have special educational needs and they thrive at home where they couldn't do in a school. It's absolutely dreadful to bring this in. But you mentioned the case at the beginning of Sarah Sharif. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that now, or
Sarah Sharif was not home educated. She was removed for school for 2 weeks. She wasn't removed. She died in the school holidays, so she would have been off school for that 2 weeks anyway. They never sent in a notice, a declaration that we're going to home ed. So she was deemed safe to be at home by a judge. And the school didn't want to reopen the case because, they were scared they were going to be called Islamophobic, because it had already been ruled by a judge that she was safe. So, and as I said before, everything that's in this bill, if it was put into place at that time, none of it would have stopped it happening. She was failed by the other services, so the school, the social services, the judge. So why aren't we pumping the money into those services? Everything, as you say, there's already a unit for this. There's already a department for that. Why can't we just fund those more for the sake of children's well-being? There's nothing in this bill that would have stopped that. You know, the fact that they use this to say that we're invisible, home educators are invisible. I mean, the majority of home educators are out in the world every day. Most of it doesn't happen at home. So therefore, we're out, we're seeing people in the shops every day. We're using public transport. We're registered at the dentist. We're registered at the NHS. We go to the doctors. We're just out. So we go to churches. We go to youth clubs. A child at school, if they're being abused, they go to school and then they go home. At the school, apparently the statistic is 3 out of 9 children are having suicidal thoughts. That's the report from last year. So the teacher, one teacher, on top of everything else that they have to do with all their admin and the daily stresses, has to look out for that amount of children. It could be up to 10 children in the class that are having suicidal tendencies. It's not very likely that they're going to be able to pick up a little slight change. And then they're going to go home. School children, they've done their socialising because they've been at school all day. They've done their learning. So they usually just stay home. They don't have a lot of extracurriculars. And therefore, school home. They're less likely to be flagged by abuse by another adult.
Yeah, well, like I used to be a teacher before I got into politics, and you know, it's almost impossible to flag up these things. The government says, "Oh, if you see a child is potentially a victim of abuse or something, or is feeling suicidal, whatever, then you have to flag it up and tell the designated person." But that's on top of everything else, 100 different things that are dumped on teachers. You know, you got to look out for terrorism, you got to look out for crime, you got to look out for psychological trauma, all these kind of things. It's just impossible for a teacher to do everything that they're asked to do on top of their main job of actually teaching a child about music or maths or French or whatever they're doing. You know, that's their number one focus. It's just not going to happen in practice.
So even if you're not one of those home educators who is out all day, every day, mostly, even if you are, say you're just more of a reserved type of people and you're at home more, you are highly likely to have social services called on you by a neighbour. Home educators are 5 to 7 times more likely to have social services called on them just because people are not aware of home education. And they're like, oh, that kid doesn't ever have a school uniform on. Oh, they're out playing in the road in the middle of the day on a school day. So they're called social services. The amount of people I know, friends of mine, who have had that just because someone has noticed the child's not in school. Quick, call social services.
Wow.
Out of those referrals, 0.4% translate into a child protection plan. You know, so we're 7 times more likely to be referred with only a 0.4% transfer rate to a child protection plan. Whereas social services called on school children, 9.5% turn into child protection plans. And there was a Conservative MP who set up a think tank. And obviously a think tank cannot be freedom of information requested. But he got his statistics that he manipulated from the NSPCC. And you can freedom of information request a charity. And what we've found is some of the statistics to do with like this abuse and this danger in home educated cases have been manipulated so much, it's unrecognizable and completely irrelevant. For one example is there was a similar case of abuse to a child. The link to home education within that case was that the mother that abused the child was home educated herself very briefly for about 3 months when she was younger. It's not really a linked case, in my opinion. So you can't use that against us as they are. And historically, we know staff to pupil abuse is so high in schools. In the last 4 years, the amount of front page newspapers we've had in my area in Southend of teacher, jail time, paedophilia, sexual abuse is ridiculous. I can name about 5. Obviously, I won't go into details.
Yeah.
And obviously, I said the statistics earlier of it's like 79% of children. I mean, that survey, girls aged 9 to 16, it had a, let's see if I can find it. I think it was like 86% of them were admitted they were to perform sexual acts that they didn't want to do. So what the hell was actually going on in schools? What, like,
I mean, you know, we speak about this a lot. There's sexualization going on in schools. You have all of these perverted activists going in who are trying to get kids to do sexual things. That's where the government needs to be trying to sort people out and putting people in jail, not coming and lying about home education and deceiving people into thinking it's bad when actually it's very, very good. And it's again, just another inversion that we need to speak out against. So, you know, thank you for doing that.
And obviously the last thing, the register. So they want every child, so this will be home educated children and school children, all children will have a unique identification number. Yeah.
Wow.
So the backlash to that would be, oh, well, we already have a national insurance number. There's no problem. But it's the way they want to expand it and the way what they want to do with it. So it's like a lifelong digital report card. So you will have, if you hit another child in nursery when you were 4, it'll be on the card. If you smoke in the bike sheds at age 12, it'll be on your report card. And they're suggesting that we use these things for things like interviews. But, you know, I've never actually had an employer ask me about my GCSE results, to be honest. So
I used to when I was younger, but now, you know, I'm in my 50s. No one asks me about my GCSEs anymore.
So no one's ever asked me to prove it, but it'd be so great because these digital things will show all employers what your exam results are. But obviously we've got the police now that are using predictive criminal behavior AI. So I can see this being used in that manner against us, you know, and how long before it becomes from birth? And then you've got a whole generation of children that have been groomed from birth to think that this social credit system is completely normal. And they will use the same thing again. They will use child safety. Oh, we must all get, because this identification number, digital passport, it's biometric. So you cannot password reset a biometric register. No. So there's already children in school using retina scans for free school meals, and you will have your fingerprint. So I know for Kent and Essex county councils, their data breaches of the last 10 years has gone up and up and up and up. So if this register gets hacked and you're like 9 years old, 7 years old, you've forever got someone who can access your bank account. You forever got identity theft. It's not secure enough at the moment to have a biometric anything. Whether it's
I don't think these things will ever be secure enough. And again, this sounds like another pincer movement. They're doing this over here with this bill to try and say, oh, we need this for children's safety. But over here, they're trying to bring in digital identity, which will then mean that you have a social credit score for life. And then ultimately that will tie up with central bank digital currencies and they can control what you spend. You can see this, you know, when you look at all the different parts of the program, they're trying to pretend they're unrelated, but they're not. It all fits together in a whole scheme. And it's something we don't want.
No, and this part's not written in the bill. This is my own thoughts. But how long before that identification number becomes a chip inside the body? You know, that's where it's going. And it's very high risk for those people who have fled domestic violence, so past abusers, to the fact where there will be some parents who will just put their children back into school because they don't want to have the other parents consent to the home education, or this could flag a lot of stress because it will be a massive register open to past abusers and potential abusers. Basically, my husband said it's like Just Eat for paedophiles. That's what it will be. It will be this big, easily hackable register because they want to know everything, especially at the home. What group